Welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to welcome Dr. Jeff Cohn and Dr. Mark Lund. Thanks for joining us today, Jeff and Mark.
It's a pleasure.
Great to be here.
I'm happy to have you. So by way of introductions, Dr. Jeff Cohn and I connected last summer. We're both on the traction team for Medicine Forward. And during one of our recent meetings, Jeff had commented that we hadn't had our own conversation yet. And I said, that is true. I would love to make it happen. And so we did. And Jeff is a hematology oncologist who later became involved with quality and patient safety and positive deviance. He received coaching certification through CTI and ICF, and Jeff has a special interest in positive intelligence. We talked about how you can rewire your brain when facing challenges, tap into higher level thinking, and stop self-sabotage when using these techniques. Jeff is a leadership and mental fitness coach for physicians and other healthcare professionals, and he brings many years of wisdom and experience into all of his interactions, and I feel lucky to know you, Jeff.
Same here, Kim.
Thanks. And Dr. Mark Lund reached out last fall after reading a collaborative Kevin MD article I had published with several other physicians, and we talked about the critical nature of doctors sharing their stories. And Mark's company, UpLift Profits, fosters positive change within organizations, paving the way for a future where sustained corporate financial success is intrinsically tied to the happiness and meaningful pursuit of its people. And that's a beautiful mission. I love that. And Mark harnessed the principles and strategies of his program, Happiness by Design, to lift himself out of physician burnout, and he's dedicated to sharing it with others. And our conversation was cut short last month as I was hopping on the call with Jeff, and then I connected the two of you. And now you guys are buddies, and here we are. So today we'll be talking about how you're both passionate about positivity. That includes positive psychology, positive deviance, positive intelligence, positivity in human life, human interactions, human relationships, and teams, especially in healthcare. So that's a lot of positivity to talk about. And we can get going by, I'll ask each of you to share what you'd most like our audience to know about you. And Jeff, why don't you go first?
Well, I'm born and raised Philadelphian, and like many Philadelphians, have spent almost my whole life there. Went away for college and for part of my medical training, but have been living in and around Philadelphia since the early 80s, where I raised my family, married to my high school sweetheart. We're having our 47th year of wedded bliss coming up next month.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Diehard Philadelphia sports fan and a rock and roll fiend. Played drums and sang vocals in my high school rock band Atlantis. I'm sure everybody has heard of that. And anyway, I really felt like my time taking care of patients and working in healthcare was me responding to a calling, and the work I'm doing now continues to feel that way.
Yeah, thank you. That's beautiful, Jeff. And how about yourself, Mark?
You know, the reason I think that we connected and that Jeff and I found such immediate synergy is because we are basically cut from the same bolt of cloth. I was born and raised in New Jersey. My first entrepreneurial effort was actually as a magician and escape artist, and that went until I was about 30, from the 5th grade. But, you know, the first part of my life, honestly, was devoted to, like Jeff, keeping people alive, giving them months, years ahead, taking them from a point of suffering to a place of hopefully restoring health. The last part of my life, after going through burnout, I decided to dedicate to adding life to people's years. And, you know, human beings compound. And when you take care of those who are worthy to serve the those that help others, then you magnify that impact. And that's why my focus in this other entrepreneurial effort is really to work in the healthcare industry, and to help those who help others. And again, magnify that impact on human beings, bringing life to them and trying to help people to be able to navigate their own challenges. There are issues that we all are aware of at a systemic issue level, rather, and organizational issues and individual issues. Well, if we can take care of some things at an organizational and individual issues, we can help so many people, doctors, nurses, therapists, while others engage at a systemic issue to try to fix the bigger issues. So that's where Jeff and I sort of, I think, aligned. I don't want to speak for him, but we just found this immense, passion for positivity, and we come at it from two different ways, and that's okay. A beautiful diamond has several facets, and they're all important to get the brilliance of the diamond. So that's, I think we're going to probably wind up spending some of our time together with you today, Kim.
That's awesome. I love that. And I love the way you said that you spent the first part of your life adding years to people's lives, and now you're adding life to their years. I thought that's beautiful. And also, I fully understand what you're saying about, like my physician coach, Dr. Michael Hirsch, had said, when he helps his patients at work, he's a gastroenterologist, he helps those individual patients. But when he coaches physicians, then he, basically helps every one of their patients, right? If the physician is in a better mental space, so the impact is amplified. So I fully understand what you're saying. So thank you. And so as we get started, Jeff, what would you like to say about positivity? Take it away.
Well, I think healthcare oftentimes has a problem focus. We come to see our healthcare providers often with a problem. And when I got trained to be doing my notes in the chart, it was a problem-oriented focus to it. So that kind of instills in us a belief that we all start with the problem and then work to solve that. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but it does get your brain working in certain patterns. And sometimes it kind of can suck you into what we call sometimes a vortex of negativity, where all you see are problems. So the work that I've done, and particularly this positive deviance framework, which is about solutions hiding in plain sight in front of us, kind of flips things on its head. And yes, in an area where there are problems, it begins to ask you to look for and think about, okay, well, is anyone not having a problem? Is anyone actually thriving? How are they doing it? And that immediately gets your brain starting to work in a different and more creative and exploratory fashion. Curiosity takes over, and you start on this discovery process that could take you almost anywhere.
So I agree, and I'll let Mark speak to that, but that brought to mind, I'm a physical therapist by training, and it was the same thing. We're trained to look for problems too, right? What's wrong with the patient? How are you going to fix them, help them, treat them? And so I always tried to start my notes and, my evaluations and my interactions with them by pointing out something positive. So I, by nature, tend to be a positive person as well. But then even, as you know, I've had some of my own health travails after the last few years, and to look at my own charts and just see all of the problem lists. I'm like, oh my God, right? It's surprising I can still walk around, right? When you look at all the problem lists. But then I remember, so my hematology oncologist, when I read the note he wrote, he started out, and I think he used the word lovely or something. I was a lovely, 50-something-year-old woman. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he said I was lovely. So just sticking that little word in there made my day. So go ahead, Mark.
I love what you both have said. And, as Jeff pointed out, and every physician, every, again, therapist, physical occupational therapist, we're taught a certain way, a rubric with which we think. And the way we think is really important. It's what separates physicians, other healthcare providers from attorneys or engineers. But we are problem focused. As a matter of fact, as busy as we are, when I used to dictate my consultation notes, it was not in the SOAP format anymore. I put the problem list, my assessment, and then a plan. And then I put the subject and objective. I got it all in there, but the physician didn't want to dig through 4 or 5 pages of consultation dictation. They needed to be able to understand, what is my assessment, what I see are the issues, and what is my recommendation. So I would put that there up front, and that became part of my thinking. I was listening to Jeff, and what occurred to me, and I really love it, and again, this is where we find synergy, my friend. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It's not that they appear different, but they change. And when we start to focus on what is the vision we want of health, what is the vision we want of the providers we want, how do we start to change a system where there may not be a lot of money to change it, but there is an ability to change it? And we start to simply change how leaders interact and how physician leaders interact with their teams, how nurse leaders interact. And we start to create positivity. It not only affects them, it affects everyone on their team. It not only affects everyone on their team, it then starts to affect each patient, each of the loved ones that are with the patient. And then the next step is possible. And the next step is hospitable healthcare. When you've walked in and you've checked into a hospital, it's a very different experience than when you're checking into the Ritz-Carlton. But they're really the same process. And the difference is not the process. The difference is the way we approach that individual. But you need to have people who are happy, who are pursuing a passion, everyone who sees meaning in their work, who has a positive outlook. And the wonderful thing about, and I'll let Jeff speak to his approach in positive deviance, and mine maybe later, but they are complementary, not competitive. And therefore, when you bring both together, it is really a synergistic impact on the physicians, on the nurses, on the therapists, on the support staff, on the teams in general, on the hospital, and therefore on every community member that facility, that healthcare team provides care for. We become once again truly worthy to serve the suffering.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. And I think positivity has been looked at as sometimes an overutilized tool by some within or disciplines where there are lots of challenges, like healthcare, even with a tagline like toxic positivity. And this is not about creating rainbows and unicorns on everything. It's about taking the tough situations that people find themselves in and still enabling them to be fueled by the kind of energy that leads them to considering possibilities and being creative sometimes and tapping into the best resources that they have to offer, as opposed to what you have available to you when you're looking at the situation and saying, oh crap, here it is again. That narrows your framework of assessing what's possible to such a narrow perspective that you shortchange yourself, you shortchange the people that you're working with.
It's interesting. I'm sorry, Kim, just briefly, because I love this question about positivity and toxic positivity, because people get that mixed up. And toxic positivity is really a refusal to understand, to acknowledge, to witness reality, whereas sincere optimism is rooted in reality, and it lets us acknowledge and express both the positive and negative of a situation. You know, if a team is in a really bad place, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. No, it may not be okay. That's a toxic attitude. On the other hand, tell you what, I believe in this team. I believe in every man and woman on this team. I believe we can come together, and we are better than the sum of our parts. And if we come together in the right way, I know that we can accomplish this. Will it be hard? Yes. Might it be painful? Yes. Might there be sorrow? Yes. But I know that we can drive forward with this. Essentially, positivity in management is really leadership. It's drawing out the best of people by letting them know you acknowledge what is painful, what's here, what's real, but then helping them to pull out their best and be able to drive forward. Not because there's a punishment if you don't, or you have so many RVUs you need to get. No, it's bringing people together and acknowledging who they are. Physicians and nurses are some of the most passionate, purpose-driven people in the world. And yet somehow our modern healthcare system has eroded us, has whittled our spirit down to the point that we don't have that. And when a physician or a nurse, whether it's in a physician's office, in an infusion center, in an outpatient center, or in an ICU, or in an OR, it doesn't matter. When they are not at their peak, others start to drop off.
For sure. So I was wondering if you could each speak to, have you all both been, positive by nature your whole lives? And then I know, Mark, specifically how you went through a period of burnout, and then how did you come out of that or use positivity to come back? And would you say that you're stronger than you were before your burnout?
Well, Jeff, do you want to take the first part of that, and then I can answer the part about me?
Okay, sure. Well, I've not been a particularly positive person through my entire life. In fact, my dad's a surgeon, and his nickname was Jaws. And I learned some of that judgmentalism, if there's such a word, from watching him. Plus, he and his family were all pretty sarcastic, and I had to unlearn those behaviors, which fortunately I've weakened the hold that some of those things that were kind of core to my upbringing and crafting of my personality. So I was fortunate to get mentoring and be put in circumstances that enabled me to have alternatives. And I told Mark this story. One of the things that I learned that I think many people who become oncologists don't learn was from one of the attending physicians when I was a fellow. When we would see a patient with a cancer for which we didn't have a good treatment, he would say, okay, the given is, unfortunately, this person's going to die of their illness. Period. Now, what's your job? Your job is to be their physician and try and make the time between now and when their life eventually ends as happy, productive, comfortable, whatever they're trying to accomplish, try to help them to the best of your ability in that regard. And so that is another example of kind of flipping something on its head. Here's a fatal illness, but I've got a job that can make a big impact. And maybe it's even only on the last week or two of someone's life. Still, you have the ability to make a huge impact on them and the people that care for them. So that's like bringing in positivity into a situation that so many would view through a different lens.
Yeah, well, I love that, and that's really important, and I think it helps you be at peace with it too, right? Because you can't save everybody. So to
Mhm.
look at it like that we're not going to be able to save everybody, but what can you do and to make a positive difference so that you can still feel good even though the person is going to die. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. Mark, what would you like to share about your story?
You pointed out and you asked about my burnout. I did. I got very burned out. Was I always positive? Um, yes and no. I had a positivity approach. Again, being 11 years old and going out and printing off handmade flyers for being a magician, and eventually growing to a point you're doing, 2-hour evening shows on stage. Yes, what I really had, I think, was a lot of grit and resilience. A lot of grit. And I went to a place the first year in college, actually, the first year there. My second year was at the Virginia Military Institute, and that's a tough, first year. But I learned just to put the head down and drive forward. That's both a great thing and not great thing. And I did that through medical school. I did it through residency and fellowship. And, back before the residency review commission, put in, the work hour restrictions. Jeff and I both did those hours, and you just continue to move forward, and you don't even realize what's going on. And I got to a point I really didn't know who I was. I didn't, am I a doctor? I'm not sure who I am. So I needed to literally sort of rebuild myself, find my identity, create myself again, drive forward. And that took a while, but I needed to flesh that out. I needed to put the 3 dimensions on that 2-dimensional stick figure. And I did that through the work of Martin Seligman and his Perma V. So positive emotion, engagement in life, the relationships that we have. And these are all relationships: our work, our friends, our family, obviously our intimate relationships. Making sure you find meaning, purpose, passion around what you do. Seeking achievement, a sense of growing and becoming better, and being grateful when you have the acknowledgement for that achievement. And then the vitality that goes with it. And with that, it really wasn't a sense of happiness, which was the perma, but by adding the vitality, it's a sense of flourishing. And it is said that, most people don't want necessarily to be happy. What they want is the experience of being alive. And the experience of being alive, if you were to boil it down to a word, is to flourish. So, yes, I did help myself. Am I perfect now? No, but I'm never going to be perfect, and neither is anyone else. But that's okay, because I am a work in progress, and so is everyone else. And that means that I don't need to judge, but I can approach people with compassion. Compassion and judgmentalism are on opposite ends of the spectrum. So by shifting judgment away, I become more compassionate, and therefore I'm able to be better for patients, for clients, for my family, for my friends, and hopefully just a better person all around. But was I always that way? No.
That's great. I'm glad that you've each found a path. So if we're speaking to physicians who are going to work all day, coming home, they have, portal messages, lab work, reports to write, and then they're getting up the next day again, and they just can't seem to find how anything would be different or could be different. If you would each like to speak to something they could do or try.
So, in the positive intelligence framework that I utilize in my coaching, there's kind of a two-pronged approach. The first is what we call getting your hand off the hot stove. So, as you mentioned in my intro, part of, and it could be a big part of how lousy we're feeling when we're facing the kind of challenges that you're describing, comes from inside us rather than what we're imagining is out there in the world making us feel this way. So the first step is to stop piling on to yourself and making yourself feel bad, and just recognizing, oh, there's my judge of self again. There's my stickler, perfectionist, that's forcing me to try and be perfect in a situation where good enough is good enough. So that kind of thing. And then now that you're not doing as much self-sabotaging, start shifting into these other regions of our brains that we mostly underutilize. That in many of us, they're kind of atrophied because we rely so much on these survival responses. And in those other regions, we use this framework that we call the SAGE perspective, which is basically that every challenge, every circumstances can be a gift and opportunity if we choose to look at it that way. There's always something that we might be able to learn, or there's always some sort of source of strength that we can be exercising, that's like trying to lift a weight that's just at our level of being able to start nudging it, but by trying to move it, we're making ourselves stronger. So that's what we get to be fueled by when we're in this SAGE perspective. And then we look at this thing that we need to pay attention to, like all the stuff that is filling up the hours of our day and preventing me from being with my family like I want to, and doing something different about it, but fueled by that kind of energy rather than what's sucking me down. How about you, Mark?
I love that. And, in a sense, we're all kind of energy, and there's catabolic and anabolic energy. And when your hand is on that hot stove, it is purely catabolic. It's destructive. So yes, we need to start to look at things. There's a ton of work, and I focused a lot because physicians always worked long hours. When I was back in the late 80s, and I was working before med school and as a physician assistant, I was in a small town in northern Maine, and there was an old family doctor whose living room was his waiting room and his dining room was his exam room, and he was literally his house. And he had neither. He ate in the kitchen. Physicians always worked long hours, but something has become different. And there's a lot of different thoughts on that. And I didn't honestly understand it. In becoming an entrepreneur in my mid-late 50s, the fact is that I understand now that I don't get as tired. I don't get as irritable, even though I'm doing probably more work than I did then. And it's because I'm purely passion driven again. It wasn't just that I was in my 20s and 30s and doing those 80, 100-hour weeks, that I was able to do them when I was doing the 80-hour, 100-hour weeks when I was in my 40s and 50s. No, it was the reason was I was really passion driven. I hadn't been eroded. I'm now back in that space. And each person is different, and there is not going to be a fix-all. We can't get away from the notes until we fix the system. We can't get away from the way that the organization is driven, the private equity or venture capital is driven, the payment system, whatever it happens to be that puts the pressures on each provider, physician, nurses, therapists, etc. But what we can do is we can start to, again, take care of ourselves. And I know I'll get a little pushback on this, but it's true. What's the first thing that the flight attendant says when you're about to, take off? Put your own oxygen mask on, then help others. And we as physicians, we as nurses, we as therapists, we typically forget to take care of ourselves, to nurture ourselves, and therefore we become weaker, just like a muscle that isn't used. And whether it's our mental state or our physical state, we actually become weaker. And then when we're faced with a challenge and we have that resilience inside us, we can't keep up with our own desire. And that's where I think positivity helps, because it gives you a set of tools to take care of yourself. And by taking care of yourself and then living those, making that your ethos and bringing it to life, now you impact the others around. And now we start to support ourselves in ways that we didn't even understand. So I think that whether you take any one different route, and this is again where Jeff and I see really great synergy, because no matter which route you take, we're helping the individual, we're helping the team, and therefore we're helping others.
Yeah, and sometimes you need someone else to reflect these things back to you, right? Because you've each had coaches or mentors or someone, you didn't do it all by yourself, and that's something that's important to bring up as well.
You know, Kim, it was said to me once by a really good friend of mine, you can never see the frame of the picture you're in.
Actually, my physician coach, Michael Hurst, says you can't read the label from inside the jar. That's another good one, right?
That's it.
Yeah. So as we start to wind down, if you each wanted to share a little more about or what you're doing professionally and your angle.
So, so my work really is about helping people build this foundation of mental fitness through the positive intelligence platform. And we use the metaphor of an operating system, like your computer utilizes, that's working in the background. You don't see it, but it's keeping everything humming. So by doing the kind of training, and we call it mental fitness because it's like going to the gym and building your physical muscles. This is work that we need to invest to build our mental muscles, that then create enough of a structure within us that it can be there as our operating system, so that it's not just how am I when I'm in a conversation with Jeff, who's working with me as my coach. It's when that challenging situation happens in the office with several crises happening simultaneously, and people starting to get triggered. How does this operating system serve you to navigate through that with a much greater sense of calm and ease? And I got this. I may not be sure what the solution is right now, but I'm going in with a framework that I can tackle this. We can tackle this, and we'll get to the other side of it and be okay. That's a different way of acting than happens in most clinics where meltdowns are getting ready to take place.
And we aren't taught these things in school, and it can make a huge difference, and anyone can learn these abilities. So
Totally.
Go ahead, Mark.
So my favorite sort of approach is yes and. So I love to work with individuals or small teams and to give them the tools. But if the organizational structure doesn't change, if the mindset, the approach doesn't change, then we have built up someone to still try to remain within the tension and the friction of an environment that has already been shown to do bad things. Which is one of the reasons that we called the company UpLift Profits, because the people at the top are not, unfortunately, as worried about each of the individuals. Jeff is a expert with great reputation as a hematology oncologist. I'd like to think I had the same as a pulmonary critical care and interventional pulmonologist, but we become widgets in a system. And if we can change the mindset so we can start to have respect from administrators down, we can start to show them that they can have business performance benefits, increased revenue, increased engagement, increased profitability, decreased absenteeism, and we can go on and on. They see the benefit in the numbers that they're looking at by not wearing down the clinicians and by helping and supporting them. And therefore, the physicians, the nurses, they all start to have a different sense of that well-being potential. Then what we have to do is we have to help them to rebuild trust. Many administration teams, leadership teams have destroyed trust with physicians and nurses. And it's not just broken that it can be put back in a nice kintsugi, vase. It's literally been pulverized. And we have to figure out a way, but we can't do that until they start to act differently. If they're acting differently, if they're managing human beings differently, and they see a benefit on the return on the investment, financial business performance side, then we're in a place as well that the physicians, the nurses, the therapists, the environmental service people can start to embrace it. And now we meet in the middle, just like you have a bridge. You don't build a bridge from one side, just the other. You come across from both sides, and we can do that with positivity. And with a small effort on both sides, we can then start to rebuild trust. And trust is the magic that allows everything else to move. So that's our approach.
Well, thank you. I love it. And thank you both for being my guests. I think this is a really powerful and positive conversation. And it's important for organizations to hear these and, start to make some changes. And the fact that you were both in the trenches, you know it from lived experience, and your, input would be invaluable. So thank you very much again for being my guest today.
Our pleasure.
Okay, I loved having you. And in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices, and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.